Ready for another deep dive? Let's explore Dante's Inferno. We're not just skimming the surface this time, we're going deep into the fourth circle.
Ah, yeah, the fourth circle.
So we're talking about greed, right?
Right.
I am so ready to unpack this, especially because we're working with a transcript from a YouTube video,
Oh, wow.
which I think is so interesting how people are like interpreting classic literature through these digital kind of mediums.
Yeah.
But before we even get into the punishments, which I know are very intense, can you kind of just set the scene for us? What's it like to even cross into the fourth circle?
Sure. So Dante, he describes this transition from the third circle, and the third circle is, gluttony and feasting, and it's all excessive. But you come out of that, and then you're met by this stench that's so foul that it's like a barrier, a physical barrier.
Oh, wow. Okay, so not a palate cleanser.
No.
So what is it about that transition? You're going from gluttony to greed that you think he's trying to emphasize there?
I think he's trying to emphasize that, this is where it all leads. If you have this unchecked desire, it leads to this place of utter, degradation. It's foul.
Right, because it's interesting, too, because then who better to be standing guard than Pluto, the
Right.
god of wealth,
Yeah.
right? But even Pluto seems to have a boss in this scenario.
Yeah. So, Virgil, who's our guide through hell,
Yeah.
he has to speak these very specific words to appease Pluto. And it's like these circles, they operate under these strict protocols. There's this hierarchy of power even within hell.
Yeah, it's very bureaucratic in a way.
It is.
Which is that in itself is kind of terrifying.
It is.
That
Yeah.
it's like this whole functioning society.
So true. Yeah.
But okay, so let's talk about these punishments.
Okay.
Because, like I said, I know they're really intense.
Yeah. So imagine this, endless expanse, and there are all these souls, and they're pushing these massive weights. But it's not that they're all working together. They're going in opposite directions.
Oh, no.
So they're constantly colliding with each other. They're in this futile struggle.
So it's not even just like hard labor. It's like mentally agonizing too.
Yeah.
Like to constantly be met with this resistance.
Yes. And they're never getting anywhere, are they? It's
No.
futile.
It's like that Sisyphus,
Yes.
pushing the boulder up the hill.
Yes.
But 1,000 times worse. Because at least he's by himself.
Right. And I think, what Dante is trying to get at there is also just this idea that, no matter how much you get, it's never enough. You're always striving for more. There's always going to be another weight,
Right, exactly. And another soul, ramming into you with their weight.
Exactly. And imagine the psychological toll that takes, You're constantly frustrated, you're resentful, you know that you're never going to break free from this cycle.
Yeah. And I think what gets me, too, is how, in other circles, Dante will give us these, very specific stories about people. We get to know them almost. But here, it's just this faceless mass.
That's a great point. And I think it speaks volumes about what he's trying to say about greed, which is that it strips you of your individuality.
Right.
You're no longer defined by who you are, but by what you want.
It's like the sin itself becomes you.
Exactly.
So there's also these kind of two different, there's this mass of people, but then there's these two different groups, right?
Yeah. You have your hoarders and you have your spenders. Dante calls the spenders the prodigals.
Right. Which I think is interesting, too, because it's he's not even letting the extreme generosity off the hook.
Well, exactly. It's not just what you do with your money, it's the intention behind it.
Yeah.
So you could be giving all of your money away, but if you're doing it for self-serving reasons or to get recognition, that's still a form of greed.
Oh, so it's even generosity can be selfish in a way if you're not careful.
Exactly.
Wow. But then, okay, so then there's also this. Dante specifically calls out the clergy.
He does. He sees a lot of the clergy as being hoarders.
Interesting.
People who are supposed to be, all about spiritual wealth.
Hmm.
He saw them instead as people who were using their positions to gain power.
So it's like hypocrisy almost.
Exactly. Dante was really concerned with the corruption that he saw in the church.
Right, right. But, okay, so we've got these punishments which are just wild. And to me, they do seem very much like an external representation of what's going on internally.
Yes.
But the whole contrapasso thing, it's a little,
It is less obvious in this circle.
it's less direct, yeah. I'm trying to connect, okay, pushing weights,
Yeah.
greed. Like, what is he getting at?
Well, I think that some people would argue that this constant pushing and striving and never getting anywhere is representative of what it's like to be, consumed by greed.
Okay.
Right. Like, no matter how much you acquire, it's never enough. You're always striving for more. Just like these souls are endlessly pushing these weights.
Okay. Okay, I can see that.
It's not as direct as some of the other contrapasso, of course,
Well,
but I think it still works on a symbolic level.
It does. What do you think about this? It's interesting you putting it that way, what resonates. Because, yeah, some of the other circles are very specific. Like the punishment is very specific to the sin. But this one, it feels bigger somehow.
It does. It's universal in a way. That feeling of always wanting more, never being satisfied. I mean, we all experience that to some degree, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and didn't Virgil say something about this too? Something about like entire nations being driven to ruin by this desire for wealth.
He did. He talks about how nations pursue wealth relentlessly, but end up, morally and spiritually bankrupt.
Mhm.
It's like Dante saying, money can't buy happiness. But on a much larger scale.
Yeah. And connecting it to this idea of spiritual wealth.
Right.
Because the transcript talked about like accumulating favors with God.
Exactly. True wealth for Dante wasn't about material possessions. It was about aligning yourself with God, about achieving spiritual fulfillment.
Okay, so that makes me think, I mean, if Dante were writing today, what would he say
Yeah.
about our society? I feel like he'd have a lot to say about our consumer culture, with the emphasis on status and material possessions. It's like we're almost drowning in the things he's warning against.
And wouldn't he be appalled to see how we define ourselves by what we have rather than who we are?
Totally. I mean, that image of the souls in the fourth circle, how they lose their individuality, it's haunting.
It really makes you think, what's the cost of our relentless pursuit of more?
Right. Because it's not just about greed. It's about our values, what we prioritize, what we're willing to sacrifice for wealth, for status, for that next thing.
It's about what truly matters in the end. And for Dante, that was clear. Spiritual wealth over material wealth, every time.
It's a timeless message, isn't it? That's what makes Dante so relevant, even centuries later.
Absolutely. He forces us to confront these uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about human nature. And those are conversations worth having.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the fourth circle, it's clear Dante's Inferno isn't just some ancient text,
It's a mirror, reflecting back our own desires, our own anxieties.
It's a reminder that the pursuit of wealth, if it's not balanced with wisdom and compassion, can lead us down a dangerous path.
To a place of spiritual emptiness.
Exactly. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.